Today's stories do contain some disturbing subject matter and viewer discretion is advised. And if you have a story you would like to send my way, just go to astheravendreams.com and click the button to do so. And of course, thank you. Back when I was in high school, I was friends with this eccentric girl named Lisa. Lisa was one of those strange girls. The kind that wear quirky colors, but also tried to dress goth-esque. And I really did like her as a friend, but she could be a bit much at times. I was on the football team, and while I wasn't in the jock clique, I will say that I wasn't in her normal friend group. The reason I ended up being friends with her was because in freshman year, I actually ended up in a group with her for a final project in our biology class, and I learned that she was a pretty interesting individual. I wouldn't say that we were close friends, even, but we were friends. And we would chat whenever we were together in a classroom or whatever, but nothing beyond that. She never showed any interest in me beyond friendship, and I wasn't interested in her beyond friendship. And that was that. However, in junior year, things did change a bit. I started a relationship with one of Lisa's friends, Shelby. Lisa actually got us together because Shelby had a crush on me, and I kind of had a thing for her too. So, obviously the relationship had Lisa's blessing. Being with Shelby meant that I did end up spending more time with Lisa. When we would hang out after school, Lisa would typically want to come over. And again, Lisa was alright, but she started to feel like a third wheel. It got to a point where Lisa would start texting me, asking me what I was doing. And at first, I just thought she was being friendly. At one point, it got to be a bit much when she called me at 3 in the morning to ask me if Shelby and I were going to hang out that day. I got a bit cross with her, telling her not to call me in the middle of the night, and she just sort of sheepishly apologized and hung up. That day, when I went over to Shelby's house, I told her about the call and she freaked out, saying that Lisa had been doing the same thing to her, that she had called her every night for the last 2 weeks, asking about random things. We talked it through and we both decided that we needed to put up some boundaries with Lisa, especially when we were spending time together. We got to a point where we would make plans to go somewhere, and we wouldn't tell Lisa. We wouldn't mention it around her at all. One weekend, we went to the movies just to get out and go on a date. And after we'd sat down during the previews, who else would show up but Lisa? She walked in the theater with a large popcorn bucket in her hand, and when she saw us, she excitedly yelled, "Oh my god, there you two are!" The entire theater looked back at us, and I'm sure that they immediately thought that we were going to be a problem. I just shushed her and asked her what the hell she was doing. She said that she wanted to see a movie and that she saw us walk into the theater earlier, and that her seeing the same movie was a complete coincidence. I didn't buy it, and based on the look on Shelby's face, she didn't either. Shelby just said something like, "Wow, what a coincidence." Lisa sat in the seat next to us, and the whole time she was being obnoxiously loud and annoying. It got to the point where one of the theater employees came into the room during the movie and actually asked us to leave. We tried to tell them that we weren't with her, but they didn't buy it. She was being loud and sitting with us, so we were all asked to get out. I didn't want to end up getting trespassed from the movies or told not to come back, so Shelby and I just got up and started leaving. Then, Lisa started yelling at the employee. She started screaming about how everyone in the theater was discriminating against her, and how she, as an American, was allowed to say what she wanted. I'm gonna be honest, I have no idea what she was going on about with all that, but it was embarrassing to be seen as associated with her. I nudged Shelby to go, and she agreed, and we made our way out of the theater as quickly as we could. When we got out, we heard Lisa yell for us and asked why we left her there like that. Shelby actually went off on her, telling her that she was an embarrassment, and that she was acting like an absolute idiot, and that she had completely ruined our date. At this last part, Lisa's shocked face kind of turned to a slight grin, which, again, telegraphed exactly what she was doing. Ruining our day was her plan, and she'd managed to do so. After Shelby finished saying what she had to say, she grabbed my arm and pulled me away, saying that she couldn't stand to be around Lisa right then. I agreed. We walked away and got in my car to leave. Lisa just stood there with that same stupid grin on her face and waved at us, saying that she'd see us around. It didn't end there, of course. It got to the point where Shelby had to block Lisa's number because she started calling at all hours of the night again. Sometimes she would be sobbing, telling her how sorry she was. Some nights she would call and be pretty obviously pretending to be drunk and talk about how she and I had slept together, which was a complete lie. One night she called and told Shelby that she was in love with her and that they should run away together and never come back. Mind you, Shelby and I were 17, and Lisa was still 16 at this time. After Shelby blocked her, Lisa started texting and calling me randomly, telling me that she was in love with me, and that we should be together. I told her that she was nuts, and that I loved Shelby and wanted nothing to do with her. She laughed when I said this, saying that I didn't love Shelby, and that I was just using her as a means to get with her. I hung up on her, and then I blocked her number. One of the last occurrences happened one day after football practice. At this point, it had been around a month since Lisa had really done anything or contacted either of us, probably because we'd blocked her number. When practice was over, Shelby and I went to get into my car and get home, and when I opened my driver's side door, I saw a manila envelope sitting on the center console. I asked if it was hers, and she said no. I knew it wasn't mine. I got in and grabbed it, and when I flipped it over, my heart stopped. The front said, "From Lisa to the love of my life." I just stared at those words and kind of froze. How had she gotten into my car? And worse, what was going to be in that envelope? Shelby asked what the hell it was, and I told her that I didn't know, and that I didn't want to know. She asked if I should open it, and at first I considered it, but then I had a second thought. I told her not to open it, and that I knew what we should do. I put my car in drive and I went straight to Lisa's house. I went and knocked on the door and was actually thankful when her mother answered and not her. I asked her if Lisa was home, and she told me that she wasn't, that she had to stay after school and would be home soon, which was the second blessing in this situation. Thankfully, her parents knew both Shelby and I. They knew Shelby a bit more, but since I was Shelby's boyfriend, they knew who I was. I asked her if we could come in and talk with her a moment about Lisa, and while she was confused, she invited us in. When we got into the living room, I handed her the envelope, and I told her that I had found it in my car, and I then started telling her about all the things that Lisa had been doing. I told her that I respected Lisa and that she was my friend, but that something needed to be done about how she was acting. Her mother then asked what was in the envelope, and I told her that I had no idea, that we hadn't opened it. I watched her open the envelope and pull out what looked to be a stack of Polaroids. As soon as she flipped through the first few, her face went completely white as a sheet, and she quietly said, "Oh my God." Almost as if on cue, Lisa walked in the front door, and the three of us all looked over at her as she quietly asked what was going on. Her mother stood up and turned to look at her, and when she did, I was able to catch a glimpse of one of the photos. It was exactly what you might think. It was a photo of Lisa in a very inappropriate way. I then stood up and said that Shelby and I should probably leave them to talk about things, and her mother told me that she appreciated me bringing this to her attention, and that nothing like this would ever happen again. Shelby and I left, and the whole time we were walking to the door, Lisa was watching us with an incredibly angry look on her face, which should have left me feeling guilty, but what she was doing was way over the line. As we were walking down the front steps, I could hear her mother starting in on her, asking why she was taking nude pictures of herself and giving them to her friends like that. Again, I probably should have felt bad, but there's only so much that one can take until pity no longer becomes an option. As we drove back to my house, Shelby asked if what we did was the right thing to do. I told her that we could have handled it differently, but that it had been months at this point, and that Lisa hadn't gotten the hint. I then mentioned that, since Lisa was still 16, what she had put in that envelope and in my car was 100% illegal, and that she could have called the cops and told them that I was in possession of those pictures, and I very likely could have been arrested for it. When I mentioned that, I think Shelby understood what I was saying, and agreed with my sentiment. She asked me if I thought that that was her plan, and I told her that I didn't know, but that I wouldn't have put it past her. That was the last major event with Lisa, thankfully. She still tried to talk to us some, and she would sometimes send us text from a different number, asking if we could talk about everything, but we pretty much just cut her out, and told her that we were done with her. Shelby and I are actually married, happily so, and we have a 2-year-old now, so thankfully Lisa wasn't able to drive a wedge between us like she wanted. The only reason that I even thought of this story was because Lisa tried to send Shelby a friend request on Facebook, as is the cliche reason. Shelby considered accepting it, and I told her that it was her choice, but also mentioned that junior year was only 10 years ago, and that there's a high chance that she's still the same person she was. In the end, I hope that Lisa has a great life. I hope that she finds someone else to fill the role of, quote, love of her life, because it's not me. And I hope that she can live out her days with them, because I never want to see her again. When I was in my early 20s, around 2010, I lived alone in a ground floor apartment in what I would say was a decent part of my hometown. It was a bit of a humble but comfortable place. And honestly, I was loving living alone. I didn't dislike living with my parents. I get along well enough with them, but I'm more of a loner. And I like to live within my own confines, not someone else's. For the entire first year, things went really well in my apartment. I loved the area, I'd furnished it the way I liked it, and I was happy. Then, near immediately after I signed my second year's lease, things started happening that made me reconsider whether or not I was really safe. At first, the things that would happen were incredibly subtle. I would come home from work and would find various things that seemed out of place, but that I couldn't be sure about. The first thing was one day when I got home and found my front door was unlocked. I kind of freaked out a bit at first, but as I thought about it, that morning I was in a super rush because I was running late, and it was wholly possible that I forgot to lock it. I went in and checked everything, and as far as I could tell, nothing had been taken or moved. I chalked it up to a, "hey dummy, that was stupid" moment, and moved on. A couple days later, I came home to my door being unlocked again, and again was incredibly mad at myself for having left it unlocked like that. However, when I went inside to make sure nothing was missing, it pretty quickly clicked that it wasn't my doing. When I walked in, I noticed that the lamp in the corner of my living room was turned on, which to most people wouldn't be a huge deal, but to me, it was a massive issue. I never used that lamp. It was a room lamp from my room at my parents' house that I took so that they didn't have to deal with it. But I hadn't had to use it because the living room has a ceiling light. I'd put it in a corner behind an extra chair because it kind of looked nice, but I never used it. I checked the rest of the apartment, but again, there was nothing missing. I actually went across the hall and asked one of the neighbors if they saw anyone coming or going from my apartment that day, and they didn't recall anyone being there. I mentioned the whole thing, and they were a bit shocked, but again, they couldn't give me any information. I ended up calling the main office to let them know, and they mentioned that it could have been maintenance because they were doing pest control on my building at some point that week, but that they should have left a note if it was them. I told them that there was no note on my door, and that my neighbors said that they hadn't seen anyone, which made me think it wasn't the maintenance crew. They told me that they would ask the crew and see if it was them, and then told me to call them back if it happened again, and that they would figure out a way to get the situation taken care of. And, of course, something did happen. One night, I got home, and when I opened my door, I found an envelope on the floor on the other side of said door, like it had been slid under. I initially assumed it was a note from the office or the maintenance crew, but normally they just tape those to the front door, not slide them under. I grabbed it, put my stuff down, and opened the letter to see what they had to say, and it made my blood run cold when I read it. It was a typed and unsigned note that said, "You look so peaceful when you sleep." I was freaking out in my head. Who the hell had been watching me sleep? Had someone actually been watching me, or was this some kind of screwed up prank? There was no evidence that anyone had been in my apartment beyond the lamp and my door being unlocked twice, which to me was a mountain of evidence, but to anyone on the outside could just be coincidences. Of course, this letter was a big red flag, screaming, "I'm watching you." But who the hell was the person that typed it? After the letter, I started taking precautions with everything in my apartment. I double-checked all the locks on the windows, I kept all my curtains and blinds closed, I put Christmas bells on every single door so that I could tell that they were opened, and I bought a metal baseball bat that sat right next to my bed just in case. I had also reported the letter to the office, who made a police report with my information, and they had an officer that would circle the area multiple times a day to see if they could find anyone suspicious. Despite this, things would still end up happening. I would come home to find my fridge open, my bathroom sink running, the books on my bookshelf removed and piled on the floor. I seriously thought I was going insane. I begged the rental office to change the locks on my door. I told them every single thing that had happened, and they were completely unhelpful. Their solution to figuring it out was telling me to get a camera because they couldn't do anything else. This was my home. I was supposed to feel safe here, and the company responsible for that safety was basically telling me that I was out of luck. I was starting to feel depressed and anxious all the time because I was thinking that this person was going to escalate, and eventually they were going to hurt me. Or worse. I hit a wall mentally. I wasn't sure what to do. I did end up buying a camera, one that I could hang up in the corner that watched the door, but part of me thought that this person was going to be able to beat the camera, and that they would somehow get in and mess with me without being seen. Of course, that would have been impossible. And the last day of all this was probably the most excited I've ever been. I came home from another day at work to find my door unlocked again. I walked into my apartment, more pissed off than scared, and in the kitchen found another envelope taped to a bottle of wine. I grabbed the letter and opened it, and this time it was a bit more terrifying. The item in this envelope was a printed photograph of me at work, and on the back it said, "You're always so busy." It was a picture of me serving a table that I had waited on only a day prior. I remembered the customer in the photograph, which meant that this person had been in my restaurant and that they were now following me in my everyday life. I started to panic, but quickly turned my attention to the camera in the corner of the room. This guy had the gall not to only walk in, but walk right in front of the camera to get into my kitchen. When I got to my computer and got the footage loaded, I was speechless. I watched as this man opened my front door with ease, walked in with a huge smile on his face, and put the bottle of wine on the counter. I watched as he put the photo on the counter and wrote his note on the back of it, and placed it in the envelope. The reason that I had that level of excitement that I mentioned earlier was because I knew who this was. It was one of the maintenance guys for the property. I had seen him on the property. I had waved at him. I'd had short, passing conversations with him. I called the office and told them that I had the video of the person breaking into my place, and I asked one of the property managers to come to my apartment so that I could show them. They did, and I could tell by the look on his face that he wasn't surprised to see what I was showing him. To wrap this up a bit quicker, I called the police, and I showed them the evidence. After he was arrested, it came out that this wasn't his first offense. He had been arrested and reported of stalking numerous other women. The reason that the office manager wasn't surprised was because he knew full well that this guy had done this before. Apparently, he was what they called a second chance hire. They knew that he had a record of stalking, and when I told them that I was being stalked, they didn't put two and two together. I have no problem with second chance hires. People do deserve a second chance when they make mistakes. But he was a textbook case of, we hired a man known for stalking women, we have a woman being stalked, maybe we should consider that. Thankfully, the police took this all very seriously. And since he had a record, they had zero tolerance for his actions, and he went away in cuffs. And, of course, after he was arrested, all of the craziness stopped. Obviously, I moved out of that property and into a new apartment. The inaction of the property management was enough for me to break my lease, which I happily did. This is a long story, so I'll try to make it as concise as I can. I was a member of the Queen fandom, mainly Freddie Mercury. Queen fans are a surprisingly gross, homophobic bunch of people, and so there were many fights over Freddie's sexuality. I had some theories about him and his psychology, but no one was prepared to listen, and I'd spend far too long in forums arguing with stupid people, and I was sick of it. And was about to leave when a woman, Emily Ramirez, no real names are going to be used here, messaged me saying that she agreed with all of my theories and asked to friend request me. We chatted on Facebook Messenger for ages, testing the water, I guess, to get to know each other. We became pretty close over the weeks, finding out that we both had the same dark, inappropriate sense of humor. Despite a 6-hour time zone difference, I'm in London, England, and she was in Texas, we were pretty close, telling each other all of our personal stuff, fighting trolls together, and, most importantly, laughing. Just hysterically laughing. We even spoke on the phone for hours and hours about Freddie Mercury, his personality, theories about his songs and pre-fame life story. There was no one else who shared our views except another woman called Alyssa, whom she met on YouTube. Emily invited Alyssa to our group chat for a while, but eventually Alyssa stopped messaging and I sort of forgot about her. At this time, there was no reason to doubt that Emily was real. If she said she was doing something in her life, her Facebook checked out. For example, she graduated from law school and celebrated by going on a 6-week road trip from Houston to Anaheim, stopping at Roswell, New Mexico, El Paso, Sedona, Arizona, the Grand Canyon, and Las Vegas on her way. I'd always wanted to see the American desert, and she suggested that I should come over and do a road trip with her the next year. As she went, photos appeared in the locations that she told me she was going to, in the order one might logically travel, and I was fascinated by these places that I dreamed of seeing. Emily is a lesbian, and she told me that she had a crazy ex who was out of her league, tall and blonde. And, sure enough, there were photos of the two of them from the previous Halloween. When she asked me for hair dye advice after her hair went wrong from pool chlorine, there were photos to prove it. She played guitar, and when someone requested a song, she duly posted a video of herself playing it. And she was a bit sick of Facebook in the end, so she deleted it entirely, using a new blank profile for the purpose of staying in contact with 3 friends, including myself. For a while, we kind of dominated the Queen/Freddie Mercury forums as sort of experts, and we even got to know some of his friends from his 80s gay club years, and I had written some articles on him that I was sharing in groups under pseudonyms. Soon, an Italian woman in the forums began to harass both Emily and myself, discrediting our articles. I blocked her, and 2 German women rose in her place, name-calling. They plagiarized our work that was paywalled and spread it online, saying that we didn't deserve to be paid for lies about Freddie Mercury, so they were giving it away for free. That did die down, but 2 years later, one of these people reappeared on a different forum, trying to humiliate me by posting links to old fanfictions that I'd written many years ago on another site that were unrelated to Queen. She'd worked out that it was me from my usernames. She listed all of my usernames across every social media site that I happened to be on, and accused me of being many more people who, coincidentally, had similar usernames to mine. All of this was because she was possessive over Freddie, and was angry that me and Emily were getting heavily involved with Freddie's friends. I quickly worked out that the Italian and the 2 Germans were one and the same. She'd been watching me and Emily for 2 years. I was made redundant from my job, so my lifeline was to sell Queen fan art. Emily helped me build a webpage, and I had some offers to buy prints of my work, until I received about 30 takedown notices from Universal Music Group, saying that I'd been reported personally for copyright. I warned another victim of the troll who also sold art to be careful. This girl was a minor, who had actually been doxxed by the troll. After this, the troll began using my non-Queen art as her profile photos, and calling herself the names of the people that I had drawn. She had also removed my watermarks and was threatening to sell them all on her own site. Both Emily and I quit the Queen fandom, partly because of the troll, and partly because we hated the biopic. Because Brian May pissed us off. And because we had moved on to other interests. We stayed in contact, but things weren't the same when we had no silly jokes about Freddy to laugh about, and even his friends were bullied off the forums by homophobes and the troll. Emily only kept her Instagram, where she would do live, faceless Q&As about Freddy. Then, one night at 3 a.m. UK time, Emily messaged in a panic and asked to call. She was hysterical, saying that she needed to confess something to me. Her name was not Emily Ramirez. It was Alyssa Sanchez. She had tried to tell me ages ago when she invited Alyssa to our group chat, with the aim of phasing Emily out and then Emily would become Alyssa. But she dropped the idea in the end, because she thought that I'd easily work out that Alyssa had suddenly developed Emily's personality. She said that she had tried many times to tell me her real name, but was embarrassed. Why the sudden confession? Well, the troll had screen recorded an Instagram live where Emily was showing followers her Freddy merchandise. She had her laptop on in the foreground, and the troll slowed the video down. And, on Emily's laptop screen, she observed a file named Alyssa Sanchez Tax Documents. The troll called her, threatening to blow her cover online, to tell people that she was never a lawyer and was leading a fake life. So, Emily confessed that she was Alyssa to beat the troll to it, and she apologized about the whole thing. This was not the end. From here on, Emily will be referred to as Alyssa. The troll, who we found out was a middle-aged woman named Lucy, then phoned Alyssa's mother and cousin, screaming that she knows who they are, that Alyssa still talks to me, and that she will humiliate us and destroy anything creative that we do that invokes Freddy's name. The last I heard was that the troll had pretended to be a rival publisher, in order to obtain copies of a book that Freddy's friends were releasing for legal reasons, which meant that she saw an advance copy of their book before the authors themselves. I did almost suss Alyssa/Emily out, but I brushed it off. She said her father was a well-known lawyer in the state of Indiana, but no such person exists. I thought, oh well, maybe American stuff is omitted from a UK search engine. Another time, she had filmed herself opening a book that she'd bought, and her nails and hands were different to those in selfies that she'd sent me. I put it down to her simply growing her nails out. One time she said that her dad was Mexican and that her mom was Spanish. But this later got switched around, and she said that her dad believed Spanish people were superior to Mexican people, and regularly told her he was happy he produced, quote-unquote, white passing kids. Well, people make typing mistakes sometimes, right? Then, she spelled her name differently to normal, and I just brushed it off as bad autocorrect, as her autocorrect fails were a running saga for her. Eventually, we video called, and I never understood the point of her fakery. She actually looked very similar to the girl whose identity she had stolen. So, I got catfished. And my catfish wasn't even the scary one. A stalker destroyed my friendship with my catfish, which was for the best in the end, maybe. Alyssa doesn't message me anymore, and I do kind of miss her. Lucy still has my art as her profile picture 4 years on, and on Queen forums, she calls herself Alyssa Ramirez, mashing up the two names. Me? I just keep my love for Queen to myself these days. I was nearly abducted early one morning. In June of 2015, I was a single woman settling into a new apartment with my dog. The location was close to major shopping centers and only a few blocks away from the interstate highway, but was somehow pretty quiet and felt more residential. Perhaps that's why I didn't feel particularly uncomfortable taking my frail, elderly Cocker Spaniel out for an early morning potty break while it was still dark outside. She was suffering from kidney disease, so she needed to get outside at odd times. The street in front of the apartment building was not very well lit. There's a single street light right at the corner, and then no further lighting until well down the street. Parking is only allowed on the side of the street directly in front of my building. As the building was pet-friendly, management had installed a waste bag dispenser and receptacle at the edge of the property furthest away from the building, and usually I had no concerns about walking over to it to toss my dog's bags, even in the dead of night. I felt fairly safe. Besides, throwing the waste bag away in my inside bin made my unit stink. I work from home as a telecommuter, and once my dog and I got back inside, I needed to log into the system to start work. I didn't want to sit and smell dog waste until my morning break, when I could take the trash out to the dumpster. As I was standing in the front yard with her and waiting for her to finish, an older model boxy maroon sedan turned the corner and drove past us down the street, turned around in the cul-de-sac, and then came back toward us. This wasn't weird to me, as people can only park on the one side of the street, so it's not uncommon for drivers to just do this to get turned around to park. Being new to the building, I figured this person was another resident of the complex, and no alarm bells were going off yet. However, that changed when the car stopped and parked in the dark area of the street, near the dog waste station, instead of pulling up in front of the apartments. There were no other cars parked on the street that particular morning, and where this car stopped was not close to any other buildings or entrances. Although I thought this seemed strange, I still wasn't all that concerned. Maybe the driver was just coming home from an overnight shift and wanted to park their car in an area they felt would be shaded from the daytime sun. Still, I kept it in my peripheral vision. A lanky man stepped out of the vehicle, tall with scruffy dark blonde hair. He looked to be in his 30s, wearing jeans, a white t-shirt, and what looked in the dim light to be an army green light jacket or shirt. He was smoking a cigarette and didn't approach me, but instead stood in the darkened street next to his driver's side door and stared across the apartment building's yard toward the parking lot. Okay, I thought. He must have a girlfriend or wife that doesn't like him smoking, so he's hiding while finishing his smoke in the hopes that he can't be seen from their windows. Maybe that's also why he parked in probably the darkest part of the street as well. By this time, my little dog had finished reading all of the P-mail in the yard and done her business, and I was fumbling with trying to open the waste bag that I'd brought with us. Finally managed to defeat the static cling keeping it closed. I slid it over my hand like a glove and bent down to pick up my dog's gift. And that's when I noticed the man was no longer standing by his driver's side door, but had instead moved to the back of his car to stand by his vehicle's trunk, still in the street. He was still staring toward the parking lot across the yard, and perhaps it was simply paranoia kicking in, but I got the sense that he was watching me from the corner of his eye. His posture seemed kind of stiff, not like he was just casually looking off into the distance. It felt predatory. Now, the alarm bells are starting to go off. If he were just innocently finishing a cigarette before going into the building, then wouldn't he be standing on the boulevard where it's safer, instead of the middle of the street where he's at risk of getting hit by a passing car? As previously mentioned, I don't like disposing of dog waste in my house trash, but my normal routine of walking to the waste bin at the edge of the yard would have taken me right past this guy, who, if he was truly planning to grab me, would only be a few short steps away. I decided to just deal with a little bit of stink in my apartment until I could get the trash out later. I quickly tied off the bag, scooped my dog up into my arms, and hurried back to my unit. My windows faced the street. In fact, where I'd been out in the yard with my dog was directly in front of my own balcony, so as soon as I got back inside, I ran to my window to see what the guy was doing. That's when his intentions became frighteningly clear. While I'd run back into the safety of my apartment, he'd gotten back into his car and taken off down the street. I looked outside just in time to watch him blow through the stop sign and make a left around the corner, squealing his tires as he headed toward the main arterial road. That's when I realized that he was waiting for me to walk past him. What he'd intended to do after that, I don't know. But had he grabbed me, he could have been out on the interstate and headed out of the state within minutes. I lived in that apartment for another 5 years, and I never saw him or his car again. Attached is an aerial view of the area for reference. I've added some colorized markings to show where I was, where the car parked, etc. So, that, my friends, was a collection of stalker stories. Stalker and creeper encounter stories, I suppose. Though, these ones definitely leaned more into the stalker side, which is an uncommon occurrence, but a welcome one, I suppose. Not welcome in that I am glad these people had stalkers, because I'm definitely not, but welcome in that it's a little more themed towards the thumbnail, I suppose. Yeah, I'm not really good at that logic, but you get my point. Thank you to everyone who submitted their stories to me, which is everybody here today. And yeah, some very good, scary, stalker-style stories. All of them genuinely terrifying. Yeah. Again, thank you to everyone who sent them in. Thank you to everyone who's listening to this point, and listened to this point, and listens beyond this point. I hope you know that I do appreciate you, as always. And if you liked the video, please consider hitting that thumbs up button. If you're new to the channel and liked what you heard, consider subscribing. That helps tremendously. And you can also do things such as leaving a comment down below, letting me know your thoughts, how you're doing, how things are going, that sort of stuff. You can join Patreon or memberships. That was a mouth noise I made. Sorry about that. The Patreon or memberships where you get early access to content like this and other stuff, depending on what you sign up for. You can also do a super thanks, which is a basically show of support to the channel. I wish I could do more for those, but again, YouTube doesn't allow it, so it'll be a huge thank you from my part in the end. Yeah. There was something else that I've totally forgotten, so let's just say if you have a story, you can send it my way by going to astheravendreams.com. There's a pretty big button that tells you what to do. If you just click it, you can send it my way, and yeah. Anyways, again, thank you. I hope you're having a beautiful day. I hope you're having a beautiful week so far. And until next time, remember that you are loved, you are valid, you are important, you're the best you that you can be. Never forget it, and don't let anyone tell you otherwise. And until I see you again, my beautiful friend, much love, and sleep well.